The London flat. The rain fell in a steady drizzle over Notting Hill, painting the colorful townhouses in muted shades of gray. Henry Whittaker, 72, stood at the window of his newly inherited flat, watching Portobello Road come alive with Saturday market bustle. The flat was a time capsule of elegance, high ceilings, oak bookshelves, and a rooftop garden where he sipped tea each evening. It was a far cry from the cramped council flat in Bethnal Green where he'd spent most of his life, scraping by on a librarian's pension. This place, left to him by his distant cousin Eliza, was worth millions, a fortune he'd never dreamed of possessing. Henry adjusted his glasses, his hands trembling slightly, not from age, but from the weight of memory. The flat was more than bricks and mortar, it was a testament to his survival, a reward for decades of quiet endurance. He'd been a librarian for 40 years, cataloging lives and books while his own family erased him from theirs. His nephew, James, and James's wife, Victoria, had cut contact 10 years ago after Henry refused to fund their lavish lifestyle. Now, as he sorted through Eliza's old letters, he heard a knock at the door, sharp, insistent, out of place in the flat's calm. He opened it to find James, his once boyish face lined with strain, and Victoria, her sleek black coat and sharp heels screaming money they no longer had. Their smiles were forced, their eyes scanning the flat's interior, past the bookshelves to the polished floors and the view of Notting Hill's rooftops. "Uncle Henry," James said, his voice thick with a warmth that felt rehearsed. "It's been too long. Can we come in?" Henry's chest tightened, a familiar ache from years of silence. He studied them, James's rumpled suit, Victoria's manicured nails clutching a designer bag that looked second-hand. The Notting Hill gossip mill, fueled by nosy neighbors and loose-lipped estate agents, had spread news of his inheritance. He'd heard whispers at the local cafe James's failed property venture, Victoria's maxed-out credit cards. They weren't here for him. They were here for the flat. 10 years, Henry said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his heart. And now you're here. How convenient. He stepped aside, gesturing them in with a librarian's precision, his eyes never leaving their faces. The flat was a scholar's haven, lined with books from floor to ceiling, a leather armchair by the window, and a small table holding Eliza's letters. The rooftop garden, visible through glass doors, bloomed with roses and lavender, a secret oasis above the city's clamor. Victoria's gaze lingered on the polished floors, her lips twitching as if calculating their worth. James sat awkwardly on the sofa, his hands fidgeting. "We heard about Eliza," Victoria said, her tone soft but calculated. "Such a loss, but what a gift she left you. This place must be overwhelming." Henry poured tea from a chipped pot, his hands steady from years of turning delicate pages. "Overwhelming? No. Humbling, perhaps. Eliza was a recluse, but she remembered me, unlike some." He paused, letting the words settle like dust. "She left me this flat because she knew I'd cherish it, not sell it for quick cash." James flinched, his fingers tightening around his teacup. "Uncle, we know we've been absent. Life got in the way. Victoria's business, my investments, it pulled us away." "Away," Henry repeated, his voice sharp as a book's edge. 10 years of silence isn't away, James. It's abandonment. No calls, no letters, not even a Christmas card. And your son, my great-nephew, Oliver, I've never met him. He's 8 now, isn't he?" Victoria shifted, her smile faltering. "We didn't mean to hurt you, Henry. It was just timing. We were young, building our lives. You understand, don't you?" Henry's laugh was bitter, like the rain outside. "Understand? I understand that I worked double shifts at the library to pay for your art school, James. I understand that I spent Sundays in Bethnal Green, mending books to afford my rent while you and Victoria jetted to Paris for weekends. I understand that you forgot I existed until you heard about this flat." The air grew heavy, the only sound the patter of rain on the windows. James's face reddened, but Victoria leaned forward, her voice smooth as polished stone. "We made mistakes, Henry. We're here to make amends. Oliver would love to meet you. We want to be a family again." Henry's eyes narrowed. He'd heard the rumors, Victoria's failed interior design firm, James's property deals gone sour. They weren't here for family. They were here for the flat, now valued at over £4 million, a fortune in Notting Hill's gentrified heart. He decided to test them. "Come to the library tomorrow," he said, his tone deceptively light. "I'm volunteering for a community reading program. Bring Oliver. Let's see if we can start rebuilding." James nodded eagerly, but Victoria's smile was a thin veneer. Henry sipped his tea, watching them like a librarian spotting a misplaced book. 10 years ago, Henry's life had been simpler, filled with the quiet joy of books and the chatter of James, who'd once spent hours in the library discussing literature. Henry had raised James after his sister, James's mother, died in a car accident when James was 10. He'd poured his heart into the boy, sacrificing his own dreams to fund James's education, believing family was forever. When James met Victoria at a gallery opening, everything changed. Victoria, with her sharp wit and sharper ambitions, saw Henry as a relic of James's past, a librarian with no place in her vision of wealth and status. "You're too ordinary, Uncle," James had said once, his words cutting deeper than any knife. "Victoria's family moves in different circles. We need to focus on our future." The exclusions began subtly. Missed birthday lunches. Unanswered calls. A wedding invitation that never arrived. It was a small event, Victoria had said over the phone, her voice dripping with false regret. "We didn't want to trouble you with the journey." Henry had nodded to the empty air, pretending it didn't hurt. The final blow came when Oliver was born. Henry had sent a children's book, carefully chosen, with a handwritten note. It was returned, unopened, with a curt message, "We're keeping things private for now. Please respect our boundaries." That was the last he'd heard from them, until today. Henry had survived by throwing himself into his work and community. He volunteered at the Notting Hill Library, reading to children and repairing old books. He tended his small balcony garden in Bethnal Green, finding solace in the roses that bloomed despite neglect. The locals knew his story, Mr. Whittaker, the librarian who'd raised a nephew only to be discarded. They valued his quiet kindness, his knack for finding the perfect book for every reader. When Eliza died at 85, her will shocked Henry. She'd left him her Notting Hill flat, a place she'd bought decades ago before the area's prices soared. She'd followed Henry's life through distant relatives, knowing of his loneliness and James's betrayal. Her letter, tucked among the flat's deeds, read, "Henry, you've lived for others too long. This flat is your chance to live for yourself. Don't let them take it from you." Henry had moved in 3 months ago, the flat's elegance a stark contrast to his modest life. He hadn't touched the money from Eliza's savings, save for a new kettle and a donation to the library. The flat was his sanctuary, a reminder that he was worthy of beauty, even if his family didn't see it. The next morning, the Notting Hill Library buzzed with children's laughter. Henry stood at a low table, reading The Wind in the Willows to a group of 8-year-olds, his voice warm and steady. The room smelled of old books and fresh coffee, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows. He scanned the door, half expecting James and Victoria to skip the event. But they arrived, late, with Oliver, a small boy with James's dark curls and wide, curious eyes. "Uncle Henry?" Oliver whispered, clutching a tattered copy of Charlotte's Web. Henry's heart lurched. He knelt, meeting the boy's gaze. "That's me, lad," he said softly. "Want to read with us?" Oliver nodded, his shyness melting as Henry handed him a picture book. James and Victoria hovered, their city clothes out of place among the library's cozy chaos. Henry watched them, noting Victoria's forced smile as she pretended to admire a child's drawing. James tried to engage, but his questions about the flat's valuation, its potential sale, betrayed his true interest. After the reading, Oliver lingered, showing Henry his sketch of a spider web. "It's for you," he said, his voice small but earnest. Henry's throat tightened. He hugged the boy, feeling the weight of lost years, but also a spark of hope. Maybe Oliver was his chance at something real. Over coffee at the flat that afternoon, Victoria's mask began to slip. "This place," she said, eyeing the bookshelves. "It must be a burden to maintain. Have you considered selling? We know people in London who could handle it discreetly, of course." Henry's smile was sharp as a paper cut. "A burden? No, Victoria. This flat is a gift. Eliza trusted me to cherish it, not to sell it for quick cash. James shifted, his discomfort palpable. Uncle, we're not here for that. We're in trouble. My property deal's collapsed. We're behind on rent. Oliver's school fees are overdue. Henry leaned back, his coffee untouched. And you thought your uncle, who you haven't spoken to in 10 years, would be your bank? Tell me, James, did you think of me when you were buying penthouses? When Oliver took his first steps? James's face crumpled, but Victoria pressed on. We're family, Henry. Families help each other. Oliver deserves better than this mess we're in. The mention of Oliver stung, but Henry had learned to spot manipulation. He'd spent years with the library volunteers, widows, retirees, survivors like him, who taught him that family wasn't just blood. It was respect, loyalty, presence. You don't get to use Oliver as a bargaining chip, he said, his voice low. You denied me the chance to be his great uncle. Now you want my money to fix your mistakes? The room fell silent, save for the rain's soft patter. Oliver, playing with a toy car in the corner, looked up, sensing the tension. Henry softened his tone. Oliver, lad, why don't you pick a book from the shelf? We'll read later. As Oliver scampered off, Victoria's composure cracked. You're being selfish, Henry. This flat could change our lives, Oliver's life. Don't you care? Henry stood, his frame stooped but unyielding. Care? I cared when I worked nights to pay for your art school, James. I cared when I spent Christmases alone, mending books while you and Victoria hosted galas. I cared when you called me irrelevant, a burden, a nobody. Where was your care then? The days that followed tested Henry's resolve. James and Victoria stayed in Notting Hill, renting a room at a nearby Airbnb, their presence a constant shadow. They attended his library sessions, brought Oliver to read, and made a show of remorse. James's apologies grew more heartfelt, his eyes haunted by memories of the boy who'd once sat at Henry's table, reading Sherlock Holmes. Victoria, however, remained calculating, her questions always circling back to the flat. Henry's routine kept him grounded. Mornings were spent tending the rooftop garden, his hands coaxing life from roses despite the London chill. Afternoons brought the library, where children's voices filled the void left by James's absence. Evenings were for the library volunteers, Margaret, a retired teacher, David, a widower who fixed books, and Sarah, who organized readings. They met at the flat, sharing tea and stories of children who'd forgotten them, only to return when life turned sour. You're stronger than I was, Margaret said one evening, her hands cradling a mug. My daughter came back when her business failed. I gave her my savings. She left again once she was stable. Henry nodded, his gaze on the garden's roses. I want to believe James is sorry. But Victoria, she's the poison in his heart. And I won't let her taint Oliver. David, his hands stained with bookbinding glue, looked up. You've got a chance with that boy, Henry. Don't let them use him against you. The advice lingered as Henry prepared for the library's annual book fair, a celebration of community literacy. He'd planned to dedicate a reading corner to Eliza, funded by a portion of her savings, to honor her memory. The event was his chance to show James and Victoria who he'd become, not the broken man they'd left behind. The book fair was held in a community hall off Portobello Road, its walls lined with books and fairy lights. Locals filled the space, their chatter mingling with the clink of teacups. Henry's repaired books, classics with mended spines, were displayed proudly, drawing smiles from the crowd. At the center was a plaque for the Eliza Whittaker Reading Corner, a gift to the community. James, Victoria, and Oliver arrived, dressed for the occasion but out of place among the volunteers' warmth. Oliver ran to Henry, hugging his leg. Your books are so cool, Uncle Henry, he said, his eyes bright. Henry's heart swelled, but he steeled himself for what was coming. As the crowd gathered, Henry took the microphone, his voice clear despite the knot in his throat. This fair is about legacy, he said. Not just mine, but that of my cousin Eliza, who left me this flat to remind us that books connect us, not divide us. Tonight, I'm dedicating a reading corner to her, funded by her gift, so children like Oliver can find stories that shape them. The crowd applauded, but Victoria's face tightened. After the speech, she cornered Henry near a book display. "You're giving away her money," she hissed. "That flat's worth millions. You could secure Oliver's future." Henry met her gaze, unflinching. "Oliver's future isn't in a flat's price tag. It's in knowing his great-uncle's love, something you denied him for 8 years. James approached, his face pale. "Uncle, I didn't know how much you'd done for me. For Eliza. I'm sorry. I let Victoria's dreams blind me." Victoria spun on him. "Don't you dare, James. We need that money. You know what's at stake. Our flat, Oliver's school." Henry stepped between them, his voice low but firm. "Victoria, you don't get to dictate my choices. James, if you're truly sorry, show it with actions, not words. Start with Oliver. Bring him to the library. Let him know me. But don't expect my money to fix your mistakes." The crowd's chatter faded as Victoria's voice rose. "You're selfish, Henry. Hoarding wealth while your family suffers." Heads turned, but the locals' faces showed support for Henry, not Victoria. They knew his story, his sacrifices. James took Victoria's arm, his voice breaking. "Enough, Victoria. This isn't about Uncle Henry. It's about us, our failures. I'm done letting you control this." Victoria stormed out, her heels echoing on the wooden floor. James lingered, Oliver clutching his hand. "Uncle, I don't know how to fix this," he said. "But I want to try. For Oliver. For us." Henry nodded, his eyes soft but guarded. "Start small, James. Bring Oliver to the flat tomorrow. We'll read together. No promises beyond that." The next morning, James arrived alone with Oliver, who carried his book like a treasure. Victoria had stayed at the Airbnb, her absence a quiet relief. Henry set up chairs in the rooftop garden, the city a distant hum below. He read Charlotte's Web to Oliver, his small hands tracing the words. James watched, his silence heavy with regret. "I was wrong, Uncle," he said finally, as Oliver drew a spider. "Victoria wanted a life I couldn't give her. I thought cutting you out would make her happy. But it only made me lose you." Henry closed the book, his voice steady. "You didn't just lose me, James. You lost yourself. You let her define your worth. I won't fund your mistakes, but I'll give you a chance to be the nephew I raised and the father Oliver deserves." Over the following weeks, James and Oliver became regulars at the flat. Victoria returned to their rented flat in Camden, her calls to James growing less frequent. Henry taught Oliver to read poetry, his small voice stumbling over Shelley's rhymes. James helped at the library, his hands learning the work of repair, both literal and emotional. The flat remained Henry's sanctuary, its books and garden a symbol of his independence. He decided to donate half of Eliza's savings to the library, funding reading programs for children like Oliver. The rest would stay with him, a reminder of Eliza's trust and his own strength. One evening, as the rain cleared and the sky turned gold, Henry stood in his garden, Oliver's latest drawing, a crooked book tucked under his arm. James joined him, his face softer, less burdened. "I'm leaving Victoria," he said quietly. "I want Oliver to grow up knowing his great-uncle. Knowing what real love looks like." Henry smiled, the city's hum a balm to his scars. "Then let's start there, James. One page at a time." Months later, the library buzzed with a new reading event, Oliver's first. His childish drawings hung alongside Henry's repaired books. The locals cheered, their pride in Henry unwavering. James, now working as a teacher's aide, attended, his eyes free of the ambition that had once blinded him. Victoria's absence was a silent victory, her influence fading like a poorly bound book. Henry stood by the window, watching the rain. The inheritance had given him more than wealth, it had given him clarity, the power to choose who deserved his love. He'd chosen Oliver, his community, himself. And in that choice, he'd written a new chapter, quiet and unapologetic, in the book of his life. Henry Whittaker, a 72-year-old retired librarian, inherits a valuable Notting Hill flat, transforming his quiet life. When his estranged nephew James and his manipulative wife Victoria reappear after a decade of silence, seeking his newfound wealth, Henry confronts their betrayal. Having raised James only to be discarded, he's wary of their sudden remorse, especially as they use their son Oliver to sway him. Through his work at the local library and the solace of his rooftop garden, Henry finds strength to prioritize his dignity over their demands. Choosing to fund a community reading corner instead of their financial rescue, he begins a tentative bond with Oliver, rediscovering family on his own terms in a poignant tale of resilience and loss. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, it really helps. Watch the full video for more details.